not working. So I am going to be talking about two additional things that were not in the agenda, or at least not I was not thinking in terms of presenting those things. But again, these ideas might be useful for future. So again, at some point you have to do some research work, right? So you might find these ideas useful at some point in time in the future. So one such thing is what we call a good and bad output. Okay, so I'll just go over these things and what do we mean by that. Nowadays with pollution, okay, these issues are becoming more and more important. So you think in terms of production of anything, okay? So good meaning that something that you are you want to produce what we call desirable output. Okay. So think in terms of producing electricity. Okay. So that's kind of the desirable output, and you can think in terms of production function or electricity output. Output is electricity, and you have the input side. So you can think in terms of Y, electricity output, and again you have a production function, and you can have your inputs X1, X2, X3, and so on. Okay. Now, when we do this type of thing, we do not consider the side effects of any of this production, right? But no matter what production processes you can think of, everything has some other consequences unintended. So let me just write that. Either you can say the unintended consequences or unintended output. And we call these things as bad output. So what are those things? I mean, in producing electricity, meaning that well, you are burning coal or a gas, and again there is some emission, right? So again, that's basically your bad output. You do not want to produce that, but the technology is such that well, you cannot burn coal and not generate pollution, right? So again, like in agriculture, they are also again doing something that they are using chemical fertilizer, and that's contaminating the water supply, right? So the residuals go to the water system. Okay, so you can think of anything, any production process. Okay, you will have this type of things. Okay, so what we want to do is again, you can say that well, in the production function, we do not take into account those type of activities. But in principle, one should do that because if you are thinking in terms of green productivity or those type of things, what is green productivity? I mean, you just talk about the regular usual productivity, and then you can factor out this side effects or negative consequences. Okay. So one other way of explaining this thing is this way. That means you have externality. Okay, so again, externality can be externality in consumption or production, but here we are talking about production. So you are producing something, okay, but it's causing some other, outputs, and that is negative. Okay, that means the pollution is not positive, right? It is affecting human health or many other things, right? I mean, global warming in general, but again, if you don't want to go that far, at least you know that it's affecting human health, right? And again, people living in Delhi, I mean, now Delhi is one of the world's most polluted city. Okay, some years ago we were thinking that from Mexico City, but now Delhi is basically surpassing all the cities in the world. Okay, so you know that well that is going to be affecting human health. Okay, so what happens when this air quality index goes in I don't know what is the I just told you that well that Delhi reaches the maximum or is beyond the maximum. Okay, so the schools are closed on those days when it's really bad, and you can stay inside. Well, that will be mitigating some of the effects, but you have to come out, right? So the question is that, well, I was looking at AQI or a quality index, and I just said, well, I thought that this place is going to be a lot better than the other. I think it's still better because I'm not looking at AQI for Delhi, but again, I have Kolkata in my phone, so I'm just looking at both, and I just said, well, this Rohtak and Kolkata has similar AQI. So since we always go to Kolkata, not Delhi, we'll be thinking that well, Kolkata weather is better than Delhi, but not necessarily. Kolkata is also not very far behind. I mean, it's catching up. I mean, in bad way, right? So the question is again, like without going into those details, we know that it has consequences. So one thing that I talk to my students is, well, if you can get data on this type of thing. That means, like we're talking about pollution, and we want to know the effect of, we want to study the effect of those things on human health. So the question is again, when you have AQI very high, what type of disease or what type of problems people will have? Okay, so you can get those information from. People go to hospital. So let's think in terms of not staying at home and getting cured, but in a case situation is bad and you have to go to the hospital. So there is a record. But the problem is that well, those type of information is not that easy to get. Okay, you cannot approach to the hospital and say that well, I want to know those things. There are all sorts of rules and regulations. Okay, but the point is that well, we know that there are consequences, and most of the time people will say that well, your lifespan is going to be reduced by 10 to 15 years if you live in this type of situation. We talk about smoking, and we just said, well, if you stay in Delhi for 1 month, on every day it would be more than smoking one pack of cigarettes, right? So, cigarette smoking is bad for health. We just talk about it, but nobody talks about living in New Delhi is bad for your health. Now we cannot talk about that because you said, well, what do I do? Smoking you can quit, but you cannot quit. So that well, I will go somewhere else like that. So the idea is again, just we know that these are serious issues, right? But again, like, most of the time when you estimate a production function, we ignore those things. So what happens is, and there are two reasons. One is that well, we want to look at the effect of those things on productivity or TFP. It can be, TFP can be very high by burning coal that is very bad quality coal. Okay. So the question is that well, if you factor out those, your TFP might be very small or even negative. Right? So you should not be thinking that well, my TFP growth is very high. Now in China that was happening, but Chinese government realized in a hard way that again this is not working. So the last few years they are making all sorts of efforts to mitigate pollution. Most of the manufacturing plants or activities they took it out from the city to the suburb. Okay, because again I think it's probably the same in New Delhi, but one time I was in Beijing and I was asking that well, do you see the sun? They said well, not really. You can see the sun occasionally because the sky is never clear. Okay. So that's one thing that they did, that they removed or moved all the manufacturing facilities outside the city. And then the other thing they did is just the plant many trees. So again, in a gap of 10 or 15 years, I went to, first time I was in Beijing, and the second time when I went in there, I just said, oh my God, this is completely different. So they have trees everywhere. Okay. So going from Beijing to another city where there's a conference, and again, you could see the highway, but nothing beyond the highway. Everything is covered with trees. Okay. So again, these are some of the steps. But again, in China, they can do certain things, but in other countries, because of the democratic setup, they cannot do those things that easily. In China, they want to do it, okay, they will do it because they don't need to worry about the other things. Like if there is a busti or something like that, they will get rid of that overnight, right? But in India or some other countries, you cannot do that. Okay. So the question is again like we want to bring that into the picture. So if you just said well this bad B is the bad output, then bad output will depend on what? Okay, bad output will depend on so think of bad output as pollution or again release of SO2 or CO2 in the air. Okay, so that will depend on how much good output you are producing, how much electricity you are producing. If you stop producing electricity, there will be no CO2 coming out of that. Right? So it's directly related to how much good output you are using. And then the other thing you might just say, well, okay, there are some X variables. Let me just use different notation. These are the inputs that will go into the production of that. What do you mean by production of that? Then we should think of opposite of mitigation of bad. So again, you can take steps to mitigate release of ISO2 or CO2 in the air. Right? And again, there are different devices you can install some of those devices so that the release is going to be less. It's not going to be zero, but you can minimize that. So same thing is for the car. In the exhaust pipe, they have kind of certain devices that you have to install. But again, like people often cheat. I mean, I remember first time. I mean, because in the U.S. I went to California to do my PhD, and California is one of the states where they're very strict on this type of thing. So people will take their car to DMV, this motor vehicle department, to test, right? And then again, before you go to this is like in India or some other countries. So there are some places where you can fix those things, right? So set it up and then go for testing. So you pass because you have installed that device in your exhaust system. And as soon as you come out, you just take it out, right? Because that will even. So what is the consequence of doing it? Because it will reduce uh, the speed and it will also reduce the gas mileage. Okay, so you don't want to. I mean, from your point of view, if you're ignoring all the environmental consequences, you don't do that. So nowadays they have a thing that in order to sell a car in California, you have to have those things installed permanently. You cannot sell a car in California without those things. Okay, for California it's different from other states. Okay, because so you can impose some of those restrictions. So anyway, so B, again thinking in terms of only one B, you can have many of those things. Right? So you can just write it out like this. So what is happening is that you can think of estimating this as it is because it is not affecting B. So if you look at the relationship, okay, so you have Y and Y is generating B, right? And again, like, but B is not affecting your Y directly, okay? So to say that, okay, the CO2 or SO2 is affecting production of good output. What would be the intuition? That means your bad output is so bad. That means the pollution is so bad. That means it is affecting your health and then you are becoming less productive. So we have not reached that stage. So that's why we just said, well, it goes like this. So Y affects B is going like this, but B is not affecting Y. Okay. So again, if you look at these two equations, Y is not, there is no B in the first equation. Because to put B in the first equation, you will be interpreting that B affects production of good output. No, production of B, a bad output, is determined by how much good output you are producing. So this is the setup. So again, like this is a simultaneous equation or two equation. The first equation you can estimate as it is, as we were talking about, and again, like use this y that you are getting from the first equation in the second equation, and estimate this bad output equation. So the question is that, well, why do we talk about bad output? I mean, what is the benefit of using it from a practical point of view or from doing the study? Okay, so what we do is that, well, we are interested in, or government is interested in what is called the shadow price of B. Okay, what is that? Now, if you sell something in the market, let's say what you are growing vegetables, you are selling in the market. So we know what the price is, right? Because it's marketable, right? But in SO2 or CO2, Is that product marketable? No. Okay. But again, you can think in terms of negative price. But again, like you don't buy SO2 or CO2. What happens? The government sometimes permits some, issue some permits that you are allowed to pollute this much, and then again that amount you can sell it to another company. So that well, the total is exactly the same, but you are allowed to sell. Sometimes you are allowed, sometimes you are not allowed. But the point is that well, it is not again this type of the products, if you call them products, they are not marketed. That means there is no price that you can observe. So that's why we use the word shadow price. So we are interested in calculating what is called the shadow price of it. So the reason for calculating shadow price is that we want to tax residual the companies that are polluting or the plants that are polluting the air. Okay. So the question is, what would be the basis of the tax? Okay. If you know the price of it, then you can just say that okay, you pay a price for polluting the air because this is the price of the CO2, 1 ton of CO2 or SO2. But again, there is no market. So what we are interested in is getting this what we call the zero price. So we are interested in getting this. Okay. Now, since you cannot reduce in a B without reducing Y, the question is how much good output you have to give up, okay, to reduce your pollution by 1 ton, okay. So that is indirectly the shadow price. So to reduce your pollution or CO2 by just 1 ton, you have to give up the production of electricity by certain amount. And again, like you know the price of electricity, so you can think of what is the revenue loss. Okay, what sort of revenue you'll be losing when you plan to reduce your production of beef. So this question is that well, we are interested in finding out this. This is going to be treated as the shadow price because if you want to reduce B, you have to reduce your Y. So this is going to be a positive number, and that can be interpreted as the shadow price. Okay. And then the model that we use is basically this. So from here you can get dB, dy, and if you use the assumption of monotonicity, then again you can take the inverse of that to get dy dB. Okay. So again, this type of models are quite popular. Recently, I wrote a paper with a PhD student. Again, in that application, we use banks. Bank is not the best example, but in that example, we are talking about banks are producing some outputs. These are different type of services, and then the bad output is to do all this is the bad loans that they have, the loans that they are not able to recover. So we treated that as loan loss or bad loan is what we treated as bad output. So that we have a setup like this, and we use, I think in that paper we use ES data to estimate again the shadow price of this bad loans. So this is becoming a major problem in India, especially because of the fact that banks are nationalized, so nobody is directly responsible for that, or at least they say that okay, in the end, government is going to be taking over or paying for our losses and things like that. So remember I mentioned that the bank denationalization, whether this was based on an efficiency ground, and again, when we talk about efficiency, we're also talking about that efficiency is related to bad loan. So this is also something that you can do either directly using a single equation, production function, or a cost function, or you can go through this type of exercise. Okay. That means you do a setup that the production of loans and other things are the usual production function using capital, labor, and that type of thing. And then the loan, a bad loan, depends on again the amount of other activities that you are doing. And of course, we also know, but again, there is no data that who is doing how much of what do you call it, when you give a loan, whether you are looking at the credit worthiness of the person taking the loan, how careful you are. Otherwise, you won't have what is this guy's Nirav Modi or that type of person. I mean, when I heard the news, I said, well, how can one person get that much of loan, right? Without anybody checking, or everybody is checking, but so everybody has to sign. I didn't know that. I worked in a bank for 6 months. So here, the way the system goes, that that there will be a series of signatures. Right? So everybody signed, and knowing that well, this is a like a fraud type situation. And then again, this guy is now again at the government. I don't know whether our prime minister is kind of giving him some leeway or something like that. But he is in the UK, right, in London, with several flats that he owns. He has his own life at the expense of the Indian taxpayers. So again, like if you have data on those type of things, that means how corrupt a particular bank is, then again that should be included in the analysis. So that would be in my mind, that would be something very very interesting. But the question is, you have to investigate how to get data on corruption level of each and every officers in the bank, but again at the bank level, whether you can relate it to that specific corruption level. So that would be something really nice. Okay, so I just gave you kind of a flavor of this type of thing, and then the rest of it is you just do TFP, and then you factor out the contribution of the bad output, because again you need to take it out because that's bad from the societal point of view. From an individual point of view, you care about TFP, but for the society's point of view, it's just TFP minus the contribution of this bad output. Okay. Okay. So I think my time is up. So now you'll be learning some data for the panel modeling and stuff like that. Okay.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable insights. Your dedication to teaching is truly inspiring, and we are grateful to have an opportunity to learn from you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Today we will discuss about the panel regression and stochastic frontier model using panel data. So for that, we have some files. Okay. Stochastic frontier model using panel data.